Where is God? Is God being mean to us? Or as the psalmist said, my God, why have you forsaken me? You know, we all go through times of trials and hardships, times where we feel lonely, times where we feel God has forgotten us, neglected us, forsaken us. Sometimes it feels like God is punishing us. Why, Lord, are we going through such hard times? Yeah, sadly in life, there are times when our frustrations and our disappointments with God can turn to anger with God. Why does God allow the wicked to prosper, and yet we are suffering? Sometimes for doing the right thing. What is going on? Where is God? Let me tell you the true story of two grieving mothers who saw the invisible hand of God move in the times of the war in Gaza back in 2008 and 2009. A young Israeli soldier, David Emmanuel, was on the border getting ready for the ground invasion into Gaza. His mother, Mrs. Dahlia Emmanuel, was extremely worried for the safety of her son, and she told him before he left for his mission to text her with the code words, "I'm looking after myself," and this would let her know that he was going into Gaza so she could pray for him. At 9:59 p.m. one night, Mrs. Emmanuel received the following text from her beloved son, Davia, saying, "To my dearest mother in the whole world, I love you so much. I will look after myself, and you look after yourselves." With a knot of worry in her stomach, Mrs. Emmanuel went to prayer for Davia and his squad. Sadly, this was the last time she was to hear from her beloved son, Davia. On January 4th, 2009, Davia Emmanuel, aged 22, was killed from an exploding mortar shell that also injured another 19 Israeli soldiers. Mrs. Emmanuel was so shocked she couldn't believe she had lost her only son just a short time after losing her husband. She said, "I felt like I received a slap in the face. The Shiva began, the period of 7 days of mourning, and I was like a zombie, spaced out, feeling nothing. I was very angry. I stopped saying all the blessings, and I even stopped praying." A few months later, Mrs. Emmanuel returned home from visiting Davia's graveside on his birthday. She returned to her empty house with an overwhelming sense of loneliness. And she said, "I was walking around the house, and the house was empty, really empty. And I felt as if the walls were screaming this emptiness at me." Mrs. Emmanuel collapsed into a chair and burst out in tears. And then for the first time since her son's death, she began to talk to the Lord. She cried out to Hashem, "What is this? Why? Did I do something wrong? If I've done something wrong, I need to know about it." And then she said, "I decided to demand, I wanted a sign that this is reality. Because if this is a dream, it's a really bad dream." She asked God for a hug from heaven. She wanted one more hug from Davia. And then weeping, she fell asleep. A short time later, her daughter called her and invited her to a concert with a famous Israeli singer, Meir Benai. Mrs. Emmanuel and her daughter went and took their seats among the large crowd. And 5 minutes before the concert was about to begin, Mrs. Emmanuel felt a little tap on her shoulder. Turning around, she saw a little blonde-haired, blue-eyed 3-year-old boy. He looked so angelic that Mrs. Emmanuel asked his name, to which he replied, Eshel. She smiled at him and asked if he wanted to be her friend, and little Eshel replied yes. Then Eshel's father, Benny, sitting just 2 rows behind Mrs. Emanuel, called out to Eshel and said, "Come and sit by Daddy and your brother Davia." Instantly, Mrs. Emanuel's attention was grabbed when she looked to see Eshel's father was holding a baby. Mrs. Emanuel asked how old the baby was, and Benny replied he was only 6 months old. Mrs. Emanuel asked if the baby was born before Operation Car Sled or after, and Benny replied, after. Mrs. Emanuel apologized to Benny for being so intrusive and asked if she could ask why they named the baby Davia. And Benny replied they had never really shared this with anyone before, why they chose the name Davia. Then he pointed out his wife Cherie and said that when his wife was in her 8th month of pregnancy, she went for a checkup, but doctors told her there was a defect in the fetus. The medical specialist who gave her counselling told the parents the unborn baby's condition was very serious and the baby would probably be born needing dialysis and many other treatments. Benny said he and his wife Cherie were completely devastated by the news. When they got home that day, the news was on and told the story of the first Israeli soldier killed in Operation Car Sled. His name was Davia Emanuel. Cherie was so overcome with emotion she cried out to God and said, "Help me out, cure my child, and I will name him after this young soldier Davia." Cherie said to Mrs. Emanuel a month later that she gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby boy, and they named him Davia in honor of the brave young soldier killed in Gaza. Mrs. Emanuel was so shocked at hearing his story, and then she told them that she was Davia Emanuel's mother. Benny and Cherie were also just as shocked. Incredibly, in the darkened audience of over 8,000 seats, Mrs. Emanuel and Benny and Cherie sat within speaking distance of each other, one mother mourning the loss of her son Davia, and the other mother cherishing the birth of her healthy son named Davia in honor of a stranger, the young IDF soldier killed in the battle in Gaza. Both women knew this was a divine appointment, and they fell into each other's arms, hugging and weeping. Cherie said to Mrs. Emanuel, "Davia is sending you a big hug through us." And Mrs. Emanuel later said, "When I heard these words, I knew that I had received a direct answer to my prayer." Friends, we all have times where we feel abandoned and alone. We feel like God isn't listening to us. And we have to ask, is He really watching over us? Does He really care for us? In these times, we really need to turn to God. Talk to Him. Tell Him how we feel and ask Him to please give us the strength, the peace, and the joy to get through everything. Though it may hurt and we won't understand, we will trust in God and bless His name regardless. Way beyond our understanding, God works all things, even the hurtful things in life, for good. I'm not saying tragedies or the death of our loved ones or suffering pain is for our good. God forbid. What I am saying is what the Bible promises, that God will somehow, beyond our understanding, use our times of grief and pain and turn them for good, bringing us comfort and hope when all seems hopeless, if only we will look to Him in the hardest battles of our lives. Instead of festering in our anger, in our bitterness and disappointments with God, letting the enemy sow lies into our spirit about how bad God is, we need to reread the Word of God, which tells us how good God really is. We need to proclaim His goodness and praise His name, regardless of what we see, for we must learn to walk by faith. Friends, there are no clear answers of why. Only the hope expressed in God's word. He will sustain us. He will comfort us. And He will bring us through our personal trials. Yes, life can be harsh at times. Life can be unjust. Life can even be hurtful at times. But God is always good. God bless you. I'm Bruce McLean.